Hello, Sandra.
Hi, how are you?
Okay.
Mr. Sepulveda, I have 5 o'clock. You want to start?
Okay.
Go ahead. It's what now?
Ready to start.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to call a special meeting of Cobre Board of Education into session. It is 5 o'clock. Please let the minutes show that Mr. Gomez is not here. He had some business in
Let me call you back.
Phoenix.
Ahorita. I got something coming up. Ahorita te hablo. Okay.
Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the
United States of America
and
and
to the republic
for
for
which
which
it
it
stands,
stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for
for
all.
all.
I salute
I
the
salute the
flag
flag of
the
the
state
state
of
of
New Mexico,
Mexico,
the symbol for friendship among united cultures.
United Cultures.
Entertain a motion for approval of agenda items.
I'll move. This is Gilbert.
Motion by Mr. Guadiana, second.
A second, this is Gabe.
Second by Mr. Legain. Any corrections or additions to the agenda? Call for the vote. Mr. Legain,
Yes.
Mr. Guadiana,
Yes.
Mr. Cordova,
Yes.
myself, yes. Motion passes. Approval of the minutes, board minutes of September 14th. Entertain a motion.
I'll move. This is Gilbert.
Motion by Mr. Guadiana, second.
I'll second it. Frank Cordova. Was it on?
Did you hear? That's something.
Mr. Legain,
Yes.
Mr. Guadiana,
There was discussion. I still had discussion on the item.
we're on the approval of the minutes.
Yes, that's where I have discussion on.
Approval of the minutes of the September 14th.
Yes.
What's the corrections on it?
On student representative report, page 2, there was a second question that Ms. Ortiz asked, and that was a question having to do with what are we doing to address the students who are facing a great deal of stress and depression, and they have low grades. That was a question that drew a really loud silence from all of us, and that should be noted here.
Well, what do you think you need to change or?
She asked me, Ms. Ortiz, if you could refresh our memory on the second question that you asked.
Good evening, board. So the question that I did ask was what is the priority for our students and athletes for their mental health, physical health, stress, grades, etc.
And you particularly mentioned those with D's and F, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Where does that have to go in here on the minute?
After the be the last part of student representative report.
After the sentence that says, districts are waiting on more guidance from NMMA? Is that where it's supposed to go?
No, it's a, after further discussion of the board administrator and administrators, the board decided to have a special meeting on that. And then you can put that she asked a subsequent question regarding what we're doing to address the mental health and concerns that kids have in the high school, all kids, sports athletes and non-athletes, particularly those that are having failing grades, D or F grades.
You get that, Irene?
Yes, I did.
And I had one more addition, and that was in the items for the next agenda. I had mentioned, and we had already
Right
talked
now,
about.
right now, we have a motion on the,
No,
the thing here.
I understand. I understand. And this is on the minutes that we're talking about. On the minutes, they should reflect the request that I made for having an agenda item at the next meeting to discuss preparedness for in-class instruction, which is something that we committed doing on a monthly basis. And that was Mr. Cordova's recommendation when we met 2 weeks prior to this meeting.
Mr. Guardiana, if I may, I will assure that that gets on the agenda. Irene and I discussed that today. But we'll add it to the minutes.
Thank you very much.
Anything else?
With those changes, nope, with those changes, I vote yes.
Okay. Mr. Cordova,
Yes.
in April, did I ask you already?
I don't know. My vote's yes.
Okay, myself, yes. Motion passes. Brings us to the unfinished business, item A. Mr. Mendoza.
Yes, sir. Athletic practice and district game participation. I'd like to start out by calling on Nelson Diaz, our athletic director, to provide us with an overview of the New Mexico Activities Association's guidance for return to play. So, Mr. Diaz, please come on.
Is off. I just want to say thank you, Mr. Mendoza. Thank you for the opportunity, to the board for giving me this chance to present to you on the athletics and what's going on within the state. If I may, before we start, I would just like to take a moment of silence for Mr. Tom Powers. If we could do that. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So recently, as of last Friday, there was a new update to the NMA return to play guidelines. We went from having pods, which are a group of one coach and 5 students or 5 athletes, to pods of now one coach to 9 athletes. So that was the biggest change. We've also gone from non-sport specific pods to being able to be sports specific, which means the ability to have more equipment and use more equipment within those pods has also increased. It is a lengthy document, which is also available on the NMA guidelines. So those were the 2 main areas that have changed. As far as the sanitation is concerned, those guidelines have not changed. There is constant sanitation. The students must wear masks at all times. That would be whether they're outdoors or indoors. And this, the sanitation process, which now would include the equipment that is being used and can only be used within that pod. So sanitation before and after the use of any type of equipment. I also have the Cobre guidelines, and I can also forward these to you at any point. But based on the NMAA guidelines, Cobre has devised a plan to address each one of those things. So if you do not mind, I would like to go ahead and present those for everybody. So it says all staff members, including coaches, must be tested. So they were tested at the beginning. That has obviously changed due to testing from the Department of Health and things that they wanted to do. But when we first started this in the summer, we did have every coach tested. Okay, all students must be required to have temperature checks and health screening questions prior to workout. So what we did was we purchased some infrared thermometers and provided copies of health screening questions to all coaches and the members. All coaches must wear masks at all times. That was simply addressed. Coaches will be responsible to bring their own mask, and we will have some additional masks provided just in case somebody doesn't have one, or coach forgets, or gets dirty, or it falls on the floor, or becomes something that they should no longer wear. We will have some available to replace that right away. Facilities must be sanitized on a daily basis before and after use. So at this point, we had not yet started using facilities. The only thing that we had been using was our fields, and this was outdoors. With the beginning of volleyball, it is now going to be necessary to be inside the gym and use the gym facilities. Now, all of those things, there is checklists that we will be giving out so that we make sure that everything is sanitized. Okay, as far as, okay, so there are, and so the coaches will have some gloves available, hand sanitizer and soap will be available to properly sanitize. So what we've done is we've given every coach a kit, and in that kit there is a temperature gauge, there is hand sanitizer, there is DC7 solution for disinfecting, there is gloves, and we've also included some a small med kit with some bandages and things like that, just so they can have them. They also, in that, have a clipboard which they have the questions that they ask every student in their pod before getting onto the field. We do have enter and exit strategies. Cobre will ensure that clustering of people does not happen by creating a schedule that strictly takes these situations into consideration. So that's to prevent kids from mass gatherings, hanging out before and after their practices. We ensure that doesn't happen by making sure that we create a schedule that allows them to come in at different times. We also have them coming in at different areas, using different parts of the football field. We've also used the softball field. And at this point, we haven't used the baseball field, but depending on how many kids show interest in being able to come out, that may be another place we utilize. We more than likely will do that because now the kids are in school, and we don't have the whole day to spread it out. So instead of using, because of the time constraints, we may utilize the baseball field as well. So limitations on gathering, like I said, the NMA has improved that. We are at a 9-to-1 ratio. There would be no more than 5 pods on the football field, no more than 3 pods in the gym. Continued social distancing 6 feet apart. Cobre will develop their pods of 1 to 9. Cobre won't only have, so what I just read you was the limitations that the NMAA had, and this is Cobre's plan to address it. So Cobre's plan to address it is Cobre will develop pods of 1 coach to 9 or less athletes. Cobre will have 4 pods total on the football field, 2 pods on the softball field, and 2 pods in the gym. Coaches will only be allowed to have 2 pods total at separate times. With the opening of the state and the governor's orders, also came the opening of the weight room again. So the weight room capacity, there's allowable of 25% capacity, or in pods of 9-to-1. Cobre has, so we will only have the 9-to-1 pods in the weight room at one time. So there will not be more than one pod in a weight room at one time. Equipment will be sanitized before and after every use. So our plan is
Who will be doing the sanitizing, Mr. Diaz?
the coaches will have to do the sanitizing. Coaches will have to sanitize.
And the sanitation will be by using the wipes, I take it?
It is the DC7 solution that the district is using to sanitize. We have a spray bottle solution, and we have ways to wipe it down with that solution. Okay, physical activity and athletic equipment. So this is the NMA guidelines. It says during the phase 1, there should not be any equipment used. We are past that. This includes, but not limited to, towels, clothing, shoes, or sports specific equipment. Individual drill equipment can be used, but must be sanitized between uses. All athletic equipment should be cleaned frequently. No scrimmages, games, or competitions at this point. So Cobre will allow the use of individual drill equipment, including footballs, basketballs, volleyballs, as long as the equipment is only used within that pod. Cones, ladders, mini hurdles, polymetric boxes, etc. can be used. Scrimmages or games will not be allowed. Sanitation of equipment will be done before and after every use within that pod. So because it is scrimmages, because we are limited, we are not allowing scrimmages to happen or games. So there wouldn't be, so if there was a pod of basketball players in the gym, they would be able to do individual skills only. There would not be any type of competitions happening at that time. So in order to move forward with pods, and this was something that we'd come up with, all coaches and staff had to be tested. COVID results must be given to the athletic director or the principal, which we had. All PPE equipment ordered and delivered, which we have. Sanitizing equipment would be available, which we have. Surveys sent to families 9 to 12th grade only, which we did and completed. And I do have a list of every student and family that agreed to participate. I could share that with you at another time or whenever you feel it's necessary. We needed a list of coaches that were willing to participate, which we have. List of students that wanted to participate, which we have. Schedules and pod assignments, which we created. Possible release of liability forms and emergency contact forms, which we had. And then press release, which went out. And then we had a goal date, and then ultimately superintendent and board approval, which we're working on. Also have a list of do's and don'ts for coaches and do's and don'ts for students. Coaches do's and don'ts. So as a coach, you must wear a mask at all times. Use gloves when disinfecting, sanitizing equipment. Check temperature of all students in their pods daily. Give medical questionnaire to all students in their pods daily. Carry emergency and release forms at all times. Stay within your own pod at all times. Ensure social distancing at all times. Ensure sanitize restroom after single use. We encourage the use of restrooms before and after you come to practice, so that we don't have to, but we understand that there's always emergency cases, so we will have that. Have a practice plan that does not exceed 1 hour per day. Inform the athletic director if you're traveling out of state. Sanitize equipment frequently before and after use. Don'ts: take off masks during practices, have scrimmages and games, allow pods to cluster, allow students to congregate before and after practice, exceed practice times, and travel out of state. We also have a list of student do's and don'ts, which were provided to the students prior to starting their pod. So dues, wear masks before, during, and after practice. Bring your own water bottle with your name written on it. Bring a bag to put your water bottle in it. Make plans to be picked up promptly after practice. Come prepared to train, clothes and shoes. So we discourage the use of any locker room. We don't not allow them to use the locker room. So if they do not come prepared, then they must go home. They must come dressed. Use the restroom before you come to practice. Wash your hands frequently. Sneeze and cough into your shirt or elbow. Stay home when you're not feeling good. Eat before and after practice. Inform your pod leader if you have or plan on traveling out of state. The don'ts: do not take off your mask. Hang out before or after practice. Come to practice feeling ill. Share water bottles. Bring food. Share clothing or masks. Whew, that felt like a mouthful. At this time, I'm open to any questions you may have regarding Cobre's plans for pods and starting volleyball.
Mr. Sepulveda, can I have the floor for a little bit? This is Frank Cordova.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Diaz, I've got some comments and some questions here. The first one that I've got is, okay, you're talking about all athletes that compete in one team or another. And it was reported that there's quite a few of our kids that have D's and F's. The Activities Association says that you cannot participate if you have an F.
Correct.
So these kids that want to come out for practice, if they have F's, can they come out and participate in these pods?
As of right now, yes. Until that grading period ends, they would not be allowed to at that point. We want to be able to tie this very closely related to their academics.
So our
Yes,
grading
sir.
periods are 9 weeks. So at the end of the 9 weeks, at that report, that tells you who can stay and who cannot stay, right?
Correct, sir.
Okay. And anyway, on these activities that you're talking about, can you tell me how this is going to help kids that have D's and F's, especially some of the kids that are failing like 7 classes, some that are failing 4 classes, and so on and so forth? How is this going to help them in the classroom?
Well, 54% of our class, of our students that come to Cobre High School, either are part of an activity or an athletic program.
Mhm.
We feel that it is imperative for these students to have what they didn't have in the past when it comes to the coaches, because the coaches provide mentorship, their role models, and their support systems. And at this point, we do not have those in place for our students. As we know, the rate of child neglect and child abuse reporting has gone down in the state drastically. And that is because we were there, we were interceding, we were the in-between for these kids. They don't have that anymore. You know, we were able to make sure that when they came to us to see us as coaches, that we checked on them, that we made sure that we were contacting their teachers, that we were contacting parents even to make sure that they were doing that. And if they weren't up to par, then we could hold them to the fire and say, you cannot come to practice today. You have not done your part as a student. Now, does that address the other 50 or 46% of the students? Possibly not. Those are other conversations that we need to have, obviously, as a district. But I think those 54% of our students, there went my lights, I apologize.
Of these 54%, I wonder how many parents are going to say, no, I don't want my kid to go.
And of course,
also,
that is their choice. I mean, of course, we don't want to force or make anybody think that it's mandatory, because it isn't. It isn't.
Yeah. Okay. Of these, you said the 46% remaining, say that we're talking those figures. are we prepared to bring them back into school and give them one-on-one lessons to help them out with their grades that they're failing?
I cannot speak for what plans the high school has for those 46% of students, because I'm sure they do have a plan in place to try to start addressing those students. I
Yeah,
can
well-
speak as far as the elementary is concerned. Yes, we are able to bring kids on a 5-to-1 group into the school to address those problems. And also for those high-risk kids, we can bring them on a 1-to-1 basis.
Yes, and I was asking that comment based on our student rep report from the last time, in her concern of the kids that were not either picking up their homework or maybe weren't able to do it, or something was wrong, and maybe these kids don't participate in a sport or activity. And those are the comment. The other comment that I had is in looking at the news of the schools that have opened and brought students back. As of Friday, there was 126 cases in schools that have opened that are school related, whether kids or administration or workers of the school. And that is going up. That's just a comment. Thank you for your time, Mr. Diaz.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz, I have one question.
Yes, sir.
On the sanitizing.
Yes.
I know that you said the coaches were going to sanitize, but who is going to oversee that it does get done? Because and that it gets done properly, because I can go in there and just wipe the top of it and that's it. But we need to really make sure that those things again sanitize properly.
Yes, sir. So what we can do, especially in the weight room, which we've created a smaller weight room so the big weight room doesn't get utilized. So we ensure that only one pot is in there. So most of the equipment that is in there is a really hard surface. So we will ensure that is sanitized on a daily basis. We will make sure that our custodians get in there in the morning after the last sanitation happens, so that we can make sure that it's sanitized correctly. But that is something that I can get with my coaches and with our custodians to go over how to properly sanitize certain things. And so that would not be a problem as to sanitize. And then the other things that might need to be sanitized could be a football or a volleyball, or something that's hard that would be easy to sanitize and not very porous.
Okay. My other question is, you said that all coaches had been tested during the summer.
Right.
Are we
Those
looking at
guidelines have changed?
Are we looking at retesting those folks again here soon, or
As far
are
as
we
the
just going to
NMAA
go with one test for the year?
As far as the NMAA is concerned, at this time, they don't deem it necessary to do, but it definitely could be something that we may require.
Because I see a lot of time, especially during the holidays, there's a lot of people that are running around in large groups, and where are we with that? And I think that I personally feel that they need to be tested again, and even though there's no symptoms yet, but we need to test, because a lot of times they say the people that have it, there's no symptoms. So,
Mr. President, if that is something that you would like for us to do, we can make arrangements to get that done.
thank you. Other questions?
Toy, this is Gabe. I have several questions.
Sure.
So number one is just a follow up to what you just asked. These coaches haven't lived in a bubble since June, and I think that a testing schedule should be implemented. I don't think it should just be one additional time. I think it should be done on, a bi-weekly basis or something like that, just because they travel, they interact with other people, they have relatives that come to visit, whatever the case might be. They go to shopping at Walmart. There's a lot of asymptomatic carriers. So I think that a testing frequency should be established. And I don't think it should just be once more. I think it should be, like I said, every couple of weeks or something. So that's something that I would really like to see us implement if we're going to move forward with this. Just to ensure that we're catching as much as we can, people that may have contracted the virus. So that was one comment or question. The other one is another one that sort of has already been asked already. Toy asked about how you would ensure that the coaches are sanitizing correctly. I would take that a step further, and I'd like to know how you're going to ensure that that these coaches are in compliance with all the COVID mitigations, not just the sanitizing. I mean, somebody needs to hold them accountable and make sure that they're making sure that these athletes are wearing their masks properly, wearing them for the duration of practice, not congregating in groups. There's more than just the sanitizing piece of it. And I think somebody needs to make sure that they're complying with all these, best management practices and the Cobre, everything that you laid out for us. Somebody
Right.
needs to make sure that they're actually following through and doing that. So I think it's
So,
more than
Mr.
just
Olguin, as far
sanitizing.
as persons responsible, I didn't go over it, but on this plan, on our Cobre plan, there are persons responsible for every action that occurs within Cobre's plan. And there's also a timeline and then also even associated cost. So I try to break it down as much as I knew, as much as the information that I had. So I do have that, the people that would be responsible to make sure that things are happening. And I have met with all of my head coaches. We have had these conversations. I go and I have these conversations with every single pod before they even get started. I know Mrs. Montoya's out there checking on pods, or was checking on pods, or would be willing to. And I know that Mrs. Peru as well would also be willing to do that as well. I will be out there. I promise you, on as much as I possibly can to ensure that things are happening the way that that they need to be happening. We don't take any of this lightly. We understand that there is a high risk possibility of there's always a possibility of somebody contracting COVID. That's the reality of things. But we are going to try to mitigate that risk by doing all that we can possibly do to make sure that we are being safe. I have all the confidence in my coaches that they can and will follow the guidelines. And if they are not doing it, if for some reason it doesn't happen, then they will be dismissed and they will no longer be allowed to participate with us. And this is a serious matter, and we take it very serious.
Mr. Diaz, I really appreciate that. And I would just say that, that this should not be taken lightly and that it does require more hands-on supervision. We can't take the approach of, we don't micromanage and, we allow them to do their thing. This cannot be one of those scenarios. We have to, provide some leadership and guidance,
I completely agree.
through this. So
I completely agree. So I do believe that sanitation training, going over all of those things, is going to be necessary. How that looks, how it's going to be accomplished, I think that's all necessary. Just like we are working, within the schools and creating drills and going over plans to be ready for when we come back, we have to do the same thing. So those are definitely things that we will do in order to make sure that everybody is on the same page when it comes to the health of our students and the sanitation of our equipment and our facilities.
thank you. Yeah, and I guess lastly, the question that I have is what have we done to improve or to look at increasing our janitorial staff, because that's a huge part of this, right? I mean, sanitizing everything, making sure that, you know, all these surfaces are clean and for students and athletes to return back to school. What have we done that's changed? Have we done anything to improve? Have we increased our staff? Have we looked at new products? What are we doing?
So we're constantly, well, at least I'm constantly looking at different ways to make sanitation easier, whether it be sprayers or UV lights, things like that, in order to help with sanitation. Now, in order to be able to utilize the janitorial staff that we do have at the moment, we have gotten creative in the past to where we're flexible with their schedules, and we might do split schedules, or we might ask them to be to work certain hours, just to make sure that we have somebody there that would be able to help with the sanitation processes.
Okay, well, that sounds good. I mean, I'd really like to see an increase in the janitorial staff, or recommend that. I mean, it seems like, you know, based on what Mr. Guadiana was saying with his visits to the school and his you know, what he had observed as far as maintenance goes and that sort of things. It seems like we're behind as it is, even without the COVID scenario, but seems like we have some room to increase our staffing there possibly.
Okay.
And with that, I'd like to chime in. First of all, Mr. Diaz, thank you for providing us a summary of your policies and procedures and guidelines. But for future reference, especially if you could see to this, Mr. Mendoza, that we get copies of those beforehand. It's difficult enough to follow verbally, but it's almost impossible to cover every aspect of that. And I think if you really want an informed input on our part, we would benefit greatly from seeing that material personally and in advance.
Just to give you, you know, Mr. Mendoza had asked if we could have that in advance for you guys, but the problem was that the NMA had made changes on Friday, which was kind of, which their changes always affect what we do in our changes. So I do apologize for that, not having that to you guys promptly, but you know, with this COVID and ever changing, we're constantly trying to make modifications to make sure that we are in compliance with what we do.
And that rationale will always leave a point where we never get the information. We can adjust to the changes. If you give us the information up front and say there's been changes and this is how that's impacted, it's better than not giving us the original document.
Yes, sir. I take that.
So I would appreciate having that ahead of time. Now, the points I wanted to bring up, looking at Silver's, the newspaper of Silver's reintroduction in class instruction, they had a provision where they weren't allowed, I mean, people weren't allowed to weren't required to wear masks while they were exercising. And what you've told me is completely different, and I support that. I just want to emphasize that we don't go down that area, especially when you're exercising, you're exhaling 2 to 3 times, inhaling and exhaling 2 to 3 times more than you would be otherwise. The other part was they also allowed for doctor's excuses. You haven't mentioned anything about doctor's excuses. So what would you do if somebody shows up with one?
As far as
Not
it would have to be a doctor release stating that a student didn't have COVID or showed a negative result on their test. I mean, I guess I need more context as far as.
Let me give you a little bit more context, because that's not at all what I meant. My child has asthma, and it's too much to restrict his breathing by wearing a mask. So I request that my child not be mandated to wear a mask.
Okay, so as far as that is concerned, that they would probably still be required to wear a face guard during individual workouts. So if they're by themselves and they're 6 feet apart, yes, we cannot discriminate on that based on the NMA guidelines. we would have to allow that student to not wear a mask.
Well, I'd be in favor of telling the person you can't play. And when you consider, but I may be wrong. I don't know. But certainly you should have some kind of, you should have that referenced, and you should have the coaches know what other kind of precautions they can take to make sure that the rest of the players are safe. Another thing you mentioned, the indoor practicing, like in the gym. Has the ventilation been upgraded so it has the new filters that are required? And even if you cut down the size, I think the ventilation would still be uniform throughout the building. So has that been upgraded so it's in compliance?
I will, at this point, I don't think it has. I know that the district is looking at doing that. But as we start our pods and going back, we are not necessarily going to start in the gyms yet.
But Nelson, may I?
If I can just interject here real quick, this is Mr. Peru. We ordered them, Mr. Guayana. We ordered everything, and it should be in by the Thursday of this week. I had Mr. Jaime Treviso, the one that we hired. He's our HVAC person. We went back because we had just gotten a big order on the 12 microns. So what we did is we talked to the Sun Valley and Ace, and they took them back and they reordered the other ones for us, the 13s, but they will all be here on Thursday, and we will start implementing, putting everything into the facilities that are going to be used first, and then we'll work into the other facilities. One of the things that we're looking at is the first ones we're going to be doing is like the daycare at the high school, and then we'll do, if we do the facilities that we need to for the kids, if they are practicing, we'll do those first, and then we will work our way into the elementaries. So like I said, we had a big order that we put in, and they should be here by Thursday.
Cool. And certainly that should be something that Nelson, you can keep an eye on to make sure that that happens before you start any access to that. The other part the other part has to do with the walkarounds that I did have. A lot of the restrooms are not up to, they're not ready. There's a lot of restrooms that need work. And what's really disappointing is that all the hand sanitizers that we're talking about, for the most part, include a manual operation. Somebody has to put their hand on the pump or whatever part of that is to work. Why don't we have those that are hands-free? Especially when you're talking about a gym or something like that, and you're walking from a piece of equipment to another piece of equipment, other than having, and when we talk about re-entry, when we're talking about hundreds of people, students coming in, touching the same pump. So, and along with what Gabe was talking about, supplementing with staff, when we talk about we're ready, and we're talking about spray bottles and hand wipes, it seems like we're talking about a very small operation, and we're not. I think what would make me much more comfortable is an additional staff, schedules like Mr. Holguin mentioned for cleaning, but most importantly, sprayers like have been obtained in San Lorenzo, should be available, and that's the most adequate way to clean like a gym. Granted, you go to gyms right now and you see people running around with spray bottles and wipes, but when you talk about before and after, that should be done with a much better system to make sure that the cleanliness is better applied with a sprayer. My really big concern is that we've taken very manual methods for doing cleanings, which are probably 30 times more than what they've been required before, and expecting staff, whether it's teachers, whether it's coaches, whether it's custodians, to do that in a very manually intensive way. To me, it just defeats the purpose of safety. If we make the process that labor intensive, that it's going to be, that it has a probability of making errors, probably somewhere around like 60 or 70%. You're not going to catch everything by hand wiping them or hand spraying them. we should have a budget that gives our staff the ability to do what they're supposed to do to keep our students safe. And that's one of the things, restrooms, you're saying, use them before or after. That's not going to be all, I mean, like you said, that's going to be an occasional time. So somebody comes in, gets exposed, goes back out. And you know the consequences. I really don't need to get into that. But that's where I'm thinking we're failing, our biggest failure. When I went out to the schools, and I forgot to mention this last time, I see a bunch of people that are very, very dedicated, very, very interested in making sure we're safe and have the best interest of students in mind. What I don't see it is in what we're providing them to ensure that they do. Even electronically, I mean, using technology. They still expect them to use very small screens, and I can get into that next meeting. That's what that's about. But for sports, for anything related with the facilities, I think we need to make a mass investment on making sure people are hired as well as available. We have people to call in sick. If you have a janitor that's responsible for cleaning 100 surfaces 3 times a day, and that person calls in sick, and if that person does get the virus, is going to be out for a couple of weeks, we don't have backup plans. So that's my 2 cents.
Mr. President,
The last part has to do with your comments about everybody is dedicated to the safety. There's some people that aren't. That's quite frankly the reality we live in, and they'll say yes or whatever, and they're not. So policing this would be very important, and I appreciate what you and Sandra and Ms. Peru would do, but it should be a very defined process where we ensure, especially if we suspect anybody that may not be so diligent, that exposes our students to unsafe environments.
Yes. I don't know if that was a question, but I can, in the conversations that I've had with my coaching staff and my head coaches, we have discussed this topic in depth multiple times, and I feel, and I have the confidence, and I know what you're saying. Human nature is human nature, but we have to believe in humans as well. And I do believe that the people that we have entrusted our kids with in the athletic side, at least I can speak to that part. I know that they will do everything they can to keep our students safe, and I bet my own child's life on it. That they will do everything they can to keep our people safe, because we know how important it is. We know how important it is to make sure that our kids are safe and then have opportunities. Because I can read you the letters of support and that have been coming, not just from adults but from students, and how they are feeling and the things that they are going through. I don't know that we have the time today to go through these letters, but I'm sure that Ms. Ortiz can attest to her receiving some from her fellow students as well. They are struggling. My own children are struggling. They need that support. They need that mental health. They need that mental reassurance. They need those supports that were provided there that no longer are there. They need a safe haven, and we have provided that in the past, and now they don't have it. I know that with everything, that decision that we make, we may not always be right, but I think that what we need to consider is that we are doing everything that we can and that we believe to be in the best interest of our kids. And that's why I'm here. I'm here for that. I'm here for our students. I'm here for our kids, our community. which needs us, quite frankly, and they need us. So I know this is a lot of emotion and a lot of feeling that comes behind it, and it's because we care. And that's why I can assure you that all my coaches care, and they care about their kids and the kids that they come in contact with.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Diaz. The other thing that I was gonna just kind of follow up on, one of the things that Mr. Holguin said was that you said that if the coaches don't follow up on some stuff, there'll be some consequences for them. I think the same consequences we need to put on the kids too, that they wear
Of
their
course.
masks and they do all of that. The consequences need to be there. The same thing for any staff. You know, we've been reported before that staff was not wearing their mask properly and stuff like that. So those things, there need to be some consequences on those folks too.
Yes,
Mr. Mendoza.
I agree. I agree that everybody needs to do their part, and if they're not doing their part, that they are no longer should have the opportunity to participate.
And one more thing related to what Gabe said about the testing. Can you look into whether making a requirement that if a student or a coach travels out of state or travels into an area that has a high frequency of COVID, that they be tested before they come back?
Well, it's a mandatory 14-day quarantine to begin with, and then they would need a release from a doctor.
But the quarantine is only necessary if you don't test. If you test, then the quarantine is until you get a result.
Yes, sir. We can make sure that happens by either one or the other.
Okay.
Mr. Mendoza, you were going to say something a while ago.
No, I just want to thank everybody for contributing and working with Mr. Diaz. And in reference to Mr. Guardiana's comments about the testing, well, that's going to happen with the teachers when they return too. They haven't made the recommendation yet, but the secretary will explain that to the board tomorrow when he's with us on the regional meeting. But at the last time when the superintendents were online with him, he was referring that we're going to have to be testing our teachers throughout the year once they come back. In our case, it's January, and we have to be testing them at about a 5% ratio. And I'm not sure if it's weekly and so forth, but it's coming down, and that's going to include the coaches. It's going to include me, Nelson, and everybody that's employed by the district will be picked at random to be tested. And of course, we welcome that. That's no problem there. What I do want to, I would like, Mr. President, can we have another 5 minutes to get Ms. Barrela on? And she's the one that's doing all the ordering for the PPE for the district. At my request, I asked that it be funneled through one person. And she can also speak to a concern about having, like San Lorenzo has, those sprayers, and she can also mention what we're up to. So Joyce, can you come here for about 5 minutes, sir?
Mr. President, just to address a couple of things that came up on the hand sanitizers, not the manual ones, but the ones that you put your hands under, the electric ones. We have been researching those. They're barely starting to come back into production at a reasonable price. All the vendors that we had looked at, we were being charged over $300 per device, and so that would have really limited the number of devices that we could have bought. The price has really come down significantly, so we do have an order to go for those so that we can put them at all of the schools in the high traffic areas, correct. And then the other thing is on the machines that we're talking about, the sprayers, we are purchasing 2 of them for the district so that they can be checked out by the schools as needed to be able to use on a regular basis amongst the 5 different schools, because San Lorenzo does have theirs.
And I find that woefully inadequate. I appreciate the efforts, but 3 sprayers for all the schools, and they should be on hand. And 2 at the larger, in my opinion, 2 at the larger schools and 1 at the smaller schools.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Back to you, Mr. Mendoza.
Yeah, Mr. President, if it's appropriate at this time, I'd like to lead in with a recommendation, please.
Go ahead.
The administration recommends that we allow our students to return to practice. And on the recommendation of the AD, this will be effective Wednesday, September 23, 2020. And they have to guarantee that all coaches and athletes will follow all New Mexico Activities Association's guidance and CDC requirements be followed, and the CDC sanitary guidance to be strictly enforced. And to add an addition to this recommendation, that we allow our volleyball and our cross country to participate in the district games participation effective October the 5th. That is the recommendation of the administration, sir.
You heard the recommendation. Do I hear a motion? Do I hear a motion?
I guess I'll make it.
Who made the motion?
That's 8 days.
Do you hear a motion?
Motion by Mr. Holguin. Do I hear a second?
No, I didn't make the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you did.
No, sir. I would lean towards making a motion, but I'd like to have some sort of insurance that those mitigations and additional testing get in place. Before I made a motion like that.
Okay.
Mr. President, if we could add that comment to the recommendation. Mr. Diaz, did you hear that?
Yes, I've written it down already. If we have to move the start time or the start date to try to accommodate the testing, we could try to do that. I can't give you a date right now. I'd have to talk to the Department of Health, our local Department of Health, to see what we can do or how they would go about being able to do that for us.
Nelson, this is Mrs. Montoya.
Yes, ma'am.
I can get a hold of the Department of Health to see if we can start getting testing scheduled as soon as tomorrow, if that's possible.
Then I will talk to my coaches to see if they still, to see what we can do to get them going. And of course, it's all comes down to what the board decides here at this moment.
Hey, if I can just interject, this is Mr. Peru. You can actually, through the Department of Health, you can actually just register. I registered so I could get tested in the morning. And that they were saying that anybody can just go in and register and they can get started as quick as tomorrow morning. I just registered today.
Would that give you enough time by the 23rd to get all the results back?
They actually said it would take 2 days to get the results. Because I asked them specifically, if I take the test in the morning, when will I have my results? And they said I would have it in 2 days.
Mr. Holguin, if you hear me, please, if we change my motion, the administration, to say we start practice on Monday, that would give plenty of time for the coaches and everybody to be tested. Do you agree?
Well, I'd agree with that for an initial test. And then what about, follow-up testing, a regular schedule, like I recommended earlier? Is that something that?
So that's something, sir, that's something I could direct Mr. Diaz to come up, okay? We can do that.
Okay.
Okay. So is there a different motion or the other motion died due to lack of, nobody making a motion? I mean, sorry, the other recommendation died due to nobody making a motion.
I have
I would make,
provided, go ahead, Mr. Green.
well, I would make a motion with that change, you know, if that were implemented, I would make the motion.
Mr. President and board members,
Garrett?
go ahead.
Could you repeat the recommendation, Mr. Mendoza?
Yes, sir. The recommendation is that we allow our students to return to practice effective Monday, and I think it's the 28th, 2020. And then with all assurances that they are following, both coaches and students, the New Mexico Athletics Association guidance, our CDC requirements followed, and our CDC, especially the sanitary guidance, is followed. And that they, go ahead.
And that they follow our recommendations also.
Yes, sir. And that we allow our volleyball team and cross-country team to begin competition on, I think it's October 5th. Is that correct, Mr. Diaz?
Yes, the official start of practices would be October 5th. The first competition would be October 10th.
Okay. To include what Mr. Diaz just said. Thank you.
Okay. That was a motion by Mr. Holguin. Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second? Motion died due to lack of second. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Just a quick comment before we adjourn.
Go ahead.
That being that we did not move forward, are we going to revisit this anytime before? Because I do have to call the rest of the districts, the other schools that were scheduled to play and make those arrangements. So are we talking about this would be indefinite until January, or when would we revisit this, just so I know how to plan?
I don't know. Are we going to bring this up before the end of the semester, or are we just going to let it be?
Mr. Sepulveda, I'd recommend that we revisit this, as well as revisiting the, like we had said we were going to, you know, the virtual school versus a hybrid. I think we need to revisit this.
I agree. I think that what we are talking about in terms of things being needed, I'd much rather see put into place. And once those safeguards are put into place, I'm certainly open to starting things up as soon as possible, but not until it's safe. And until we not only see the equipment come forward that'll give us that, but the repairs be made on those facilities that do need it. That right now we're looking at approving something, and it's based on practices outside. Practices will come inside very soon. And if we start with now, okay, are we ready to come inside? And we say, we already approved it. It's too late. We already approved it. So until we get a full comprehensive handle on sports in terms of inside facilities, outside facilities, I'm not comfortable approving it. But I am eager to approve it, very eager to approve it, once we've done what we need to do to ensure safety.
Mr. President, this is Frank. Can I make a couple of comments?
Go ahead, Frank.
I would like to see it revisited, and really what I would really like to see it revisited towards the end of our grading period, because I am very concerned about what can we do for the students that aren't going to participate in that want to come to the school to get some help, because maybe they're lacking in their daily education. That I'd like to see it revisited, and at that time we can see how the testing is going and how the equipment and how ready we are to open. Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Mendoza?
No, sir. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Motion by Mr. Cordova. Thank you, everybody, and have a good evening. And we'll hear a report from you sometime soon, Mr. Diaz.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Ortiz? Do you have any comments you want to share now after the meeting? The meeting is officially adjourned, but I'm kind of interested. I was watching your expression and I see the disappointment.